This week on CrunchWeek, we're talking about Pinterest's big raise, Apple's new iPads, and the NSA spying of global heads of state. Welcome to CrunchWeek. I'm Lena Rao.
I'm Colleen Taylor.
And I'm Mike Butcher.
This is actually a pretty special edition of CrunchWeek because we're shooting from Berlin, where we're having our first Disrupt Europe in a few days. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, but want to talk about some big news from the week. First off, Pinterest just announced $225 million in new funding, reportedly valuing the company at $3.8 billion, which is crazy. I mean, that's an insane amount, especially for a company that hasn't really proven that they've been able to get real revenue, or we don't really know much.
That is an awful lot of collections of knitting patterns and wallpaper designs for your wedding planning. There's a lot of wedding planning going on.
Yeah, well, and it's just interesting to see the breakdown of the numbers. I saw a couple tweets sort of made it to Tech Meme, and I don't have the exact numbers, I should. But the amount of money that is at the valuation per employee and per user is huge. We're talking about like hundreds of dollars per user, where Facebook, I think, only makes, a matter of, cents or maybe $1 or $2 per user. And it's one of the most, profitable, exciting web products right now. But Pinterest doesn't have as many users as Facebook does, and its valuation is really high.
I think the issue here is that on Pinterest, very often people are doing things where they intend to buy. And that's that intention that is hugely monetizable. Just in the same way that Google monetizes your intention to search for something and potentially buy something, Pinterest is going to monetize our intention to create collections of things that we might intend to purchase later on.
And they've just started rolling out their ads product. So, it should be interesting to really see if that product can create the same kind of revenue that Google, for example, has been able to harness with our intent. But you have to think about that valuation of like $3.8 billion. I mean, it's nearing BlackBerry. I mean, they're really, they're really getting up there. And now I think their real option is going to be an IPO in the future. I mean, I'm not really sure if they're going to be able to be acquired, and if they would be acquired, it would only be a handful of companies, maybe Google or Apple, that would have enough cash on hand to afford them. If they're going to have a premium on their offerings.
Right, absolutely. And I've always thought that Pinterest has been a risky company just in general because of the copyright concerns that have always been there, trademark and copyright. A lot of the photographs on Pinterest are other people's photographs that aren't being, used with the correct attributions and things like this. This is a huge problem, but they just signed this deal with Getty Images to hopefully, tie up those concerns a little bit better. Because once they really start making money, that's when the lawyers can really come and say, you're making money on this image. You need to get the correct permissions for it. That's where YouTube has run into trouble. And I don't even know if YouTube is quite profitable yet at Google because those copyright hits, really keep the money from really adding up there.
Google has always been quite vague about whether YouTube's profitable or not. But the other thing though is that Pinterest's use of copyrighted works, when they signed that deal with Getty, and the issue there is that that's going to make a lot of the lawsuits go away effectively with the stock imagery from Getty, and also to some extent they get away with it because there's so much of it is fair use basically.
Right. Well, we will see what happens in the future, and if they live up to that large valuation.
Yeah.
I want to move on to some big news from Apple this week.
Always.
New iPads, the iPad Air, which is a lighter, slimmer version of the existing model, and also a new OS, Mavericks. But I think that there's a bunch of really kind of important things to note. I mean, one of which is that they're making Mavericks OS free, which is the first time they've done that with their desktop OS.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because in a way, Microsoft is really still struggling. Really, still no new CEO. Surface sales not going very well. Windows being a kind of still performing in a disappointing manner. Windows Phone not going so great. Okay, they bought Nokia. That's still got to play out. And in a way, it's sort of like Microsoft's kind of like a wounded wildebeest on the.
And then they just stab them.
It's a wounded wildebeest on the plains of the savannah, and Apple's this cheetah coming along and And,
well, I mean, and what you're alluding to is that Mavericks really was, making it free is kind of a shot over at Microsoft.
Enormous shot, yeah, and especially because Apple's never really been big in the enterprise, and making Maverick free basically means that, you've got an industrial strength operating system there that's available to enterprises.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely seemed to be one of the themes that resonated throughout a lot of their announcements this week. Enterprise, they have this lighter version of the iPad Air, and a lot of analysts kind of thought that maybe that meant that there would be a more heavier, a more powerful version of the iPad that could come out that would be tailored towards the enterprise, which I think was what the ambitions were of the Surface for Microsoft when they released their new versions of that device. So, we'll see. They also, made iWork free for users. Their productivity package for people buying computers, so that's a big deal, sort of a big.
Do we think that the iPad Air is going to, give the heat some heat to the Kindle because it's so light to hold, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, it's still sort of unclear whether it will take off, the way that the original iPads were. In terms of the numbers, if you just look at the numbers, iPads are sort of not growing quite as fast. They're growing, but they're not growing fast, and I think the Air is kind of meant to leapfrog and make that growth a little bit faster. But we'll see over the holidays whether, people pick up on that. We'll see.
Yeah, it seems like there could be some fatigue there. It's like I already have an iPad, and then maybe I got an iPad mini, and then should I now get an iPad Air? But if there's one thing I've learned, it's to not underestimate that people will buy this stuff, and they will spend a lot of money on it. Like, even though I personally won't, I'll keep my old iPad that I got for free somehow, like 5 years ago or whenever. It wasn't 5, but I'll probably keep that. But it could do well, so I wouldn't underestimate Apple, I guess.
Well, and then want to jump on the NSA news that came out this week.
Yes, yeah. When in Germany, must talk about this, because what a weird time for us to be in Germany when these revelations really come out. It's so exciting actually to talk here to different tech people about how they feel about this. The revelation.
Yeah, Angela Merkel having her phone tapped by the NSA. The revelations in Der Spiegel. But it's not just Angela Merkel. The revelation is also about tracking millions of phone calls and messaging in France. The whole population of France basically is being tapped. It's quite interesting because in the intelligence community, they call it the 5 fingers. US, Canada, UK, New Zealand, Australia, and they all share information amongst intelligence services. And it's strange, very much that allies, strong allies of the US, like Germany and France, are being subject to this surveillance.
Right.
Yeah,
and
that is odd.
The Guardian had reported after Der Spiegel had their first breaking news that it seems that they've been doing this with hundreds of people, that at the NSA they asked other government people at the US to share their Rolodexes and just give them everybody, and that they'd all be part of the surveillance. And so I was talking to a couple friends last night here in Berlin, and one woman lives in London, and she said that she thinks this is a terrible blow, for how especially European technologists feel about America and the American internet. And I thought, I said, oh no, people don't really care about this stuff. Regular people don't care about this stuff. And she said, no, you're wrong. Here in the UK and in Europe, people take the privacy thing very, very seriously.
Well, of course, in Germany, here we are in Berlin, which was very famous for during the Cold War, and under the East German government, there was an enormous amount of spying, and people just don't, this is a very, very touchy subject. These rights are very hard won, as it were, in terms of privacy. But the impact on the technology community and technology industry is going to be quite, substantial to some extent. Next year, Europe is looking at fast-tracking new data regulations about sharing data between US companies and European companies. And if that goes through, it's going to make things a lot more complicated for US technology companies to operate in Europe. They're going to have to comply by much stronger European data regulations.
Well,
it's going to be a whole new world.
It is a whole new world. Speaking of a whole new world, we are in Europe now for our Disrupt Europe conference, our first inaugural one. Mike, you've been helping plan this for
Yeah.
some time now. What are some of the highlights that you're looking forward to?
Oh, well, we've got some fantastic speakers. We're going to have Mark Samway, the controversial and famous founders of Rocket Internet. We're going to have guys from Box. We're going to have Dropbox. Box.
Don't mix those up.
Don't mix those up. We've got some great players from the European scene, like Christoph Mayer, who's an amazing angel and investor. Brent Hoberman from London. We've got obviously Tim Armstrong from AOL is coming as well.
That's great. Well, we're really looking forward to it. Feel free to tune in for that, and that's all for CrunchWeek. Tschüss.
Tschüss.